Okay, so today's training session is the VeriDID training series on verifiable credentials. Okay, and here's what I'm going to be covering in this session. I want to talk about the current state of credentials and sort of like the past and how we've got to where we are. I want to talk about problems that are in the current state that we have. Then I want to discuss what is a verifiable credential. What are the different parts of it? How do these things work? And how do they solve these problems that we stated here? What benefits do they bring? And what's the current marketplace for these? So the first thing is, what's the current state of credentials? So we all have these. We have, you may have a health card, insurance documents, student cards. You can have your birth certificate, passports, driver's licenses. I have school diplomas, building permits, warranty certificates. So there's so many different things that can be considered as credentials. And usually it's you do some sort of effort, and at the end of it, at the end of the process, you get a document. So you may go down to register for your health card. You may pay for an insurance policy and get your certificate. You may take a whole bunch of courses to get a diploma. You have to submit building plans to a city to get your building permit. So all of these things involve a process, and at the end, you get a piece of paper to show that you went through the process and things were approved by an organization. And then when you have these, you tend to use these in person. So the police pull you over and they say, can we see your license, your ownership, and proof of insurance? And so you have to reach into your glove compartment and get all these documents out. If you are trying to get a job, they may want to see a diploma. If you're trying to get your device repaired and you're taking it to a repair place, they want to see your warranty. If you are renovating your home, an inspector may come by and need to see the building permit. So that's kind of what we have. And this is a system that's gone through many different iterations. And this is something people are very comfortable with, and it happens all the time. There's maybe hundreds of millions of these types of credentials are created on a daily basis. So what's the problem with this? Well, we have problems with forgery. And so this goes back quite a ways, where people would fake driver's licenses or fake diplomas. There's movies where in World War II, they would have a forger to create these documents. So if someone says, where are your papers? You have these forged papers you can show. And so this was a way of having people be able to sort of cheat on the paper documents. And when you have forgery, then you have fraud. So people can claim they are someone else, or they can claim they have ownership or some sort of rights or reasons that they shouldn't have. So they're having problems in the United States with people showing up and claiming that they're certified nurses, and they're not. They have problems here in Canada where people are selling homes they don't even own. So when you have documents that are easily defeated, the sort of built-in mechanisms to have trust in those documents, you end up with a lot of fraud. It's also easy to lose these things. So you, in your life, as you go through your processes, you end up with so many of these different things, and you try to keep track of them. And maybe you keep them all in a box somewhere, then you misplace that box, or you take it out to use it and you forget to put it back. So you can lose a lot of these documents. They can also be really easily damaged. I used to have a paper birth certificate that I kept in my wallet, but it didn't quite fit, so I just folded one edge over. But it had been in there so long, where that fold was unfortunately where one of the important digits was in my birth certificate, and it wiped it out, and you couldn't see it. And I went to go get a passport, and I presented my birth certificate, and they're like, "What's missing a digit here?" I'm like, "Well, could you guess?" And they're like, "No, we can't do that." But then the person recognized me and said, "Wait, are you Dave McKay? Oh, I know you from this, blah, 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 blah. Okay, we're just going to say it's a 0. And then I ended up getting my passport, which was, I guess, my forgery and fraud. But it's really easy to have these things damaged, to have them lost. The other thing is, it's a moment in time. So if you are issued a passport, or if you're issued a birth certificate, or you issued that building permit, um, that it only represents that moment when it's issued to you. Things can change. So let's say I got a driver's license and I'm holding on to my plastic driver's license, and then I drive really fast and I cause an accident. And the police are like, well, we're going to revoke your driver's license. And so if I don't have the plastic one on me, I'm like, oh, I forgot to have it with me. So they can say it's revoked, but I can still go around and show a driver's license because people won't check. So there's a problem with this type of credential because it can't be revoked. The other thing is it's not machine readable. There are some, like on the back of your driver's license, there's a complicated sort of QR code type thing, but they're not universal. You need special readers, things like that. And so because of that, and because these are paper or plastic, you don't use these things online. There are ways of doing it. If you've ever encountered these know your client KYC type situations where, let's say you want to open up a crypto account and they'll say, okay, great. You have to take a photo of the front and the back of your driver's license and a photo of your passport and send that to us. And I really don't like this idea of sending, copies of my ID to these people, and who knows what they're going to do with it. And they have photos of these, which isn't a very reliable way of checking anything. So these are the kind of problems we have with the current state. So what we're proposing is to bring in verifiable credentials. Well, before we can explain why verifiable credentials will fix these problems, what is a verifiable credential? So a really sort of simple definition of this is a collection of data that can be used to prove a claim about someone that an organization has made. So if we take, let's say, a driver's license. So the organization could be the Department of Motor Vehicles. So the DMV has made a claim that Dave McKay has the permission to drive on a road. So that's the someone is me, the organization is the DMV, and the claim is that I have passed my driving exam and now I'm permitted to operate a motor vehicle in the province of Ontario. So the same thing could be, let's say it's a diploma. So I went to high school and I got a high school diploma. So that's the high school would be the organization and making the claim that Dave McKay has graduated from that high school. And so that's straightforward. Pretty much any of the credentials that we identified in this mass here all sort of match the same thing. The City of Toronto has issued a building permit to a person. The insurance company has issued an insurance policy to the person. Canada has issued a passport to that person. And so that's what we're doing in verifiable credentials. Now, it doesn't have to be a person. It could be a verifiable credential. It could be to another organization. It could even be to a device. Sometimes for verifiable credentials, we'll use the word subject to prove a claim about a subject that an organization has made. And here's the interesting part about it is it can be verified by anybody. And that's really important because the things like the driver's license or the insurance permit, sure, they have information on it that if looked up by the organization who issued it, they could verify, is this an actual legitimate one? Has this been changed? Has it been revoked? But having a verifiable credential means that anybody can do that kind of thing. You don't need any special training on it. You don't have to kind of eyeball it to see if this is legitimate or not. You can actually use the verifiable credential and the verifiable aspect of it to check to see if it's good. It's also tamper evident. So if somebody changes anything in that verifiable credential, it will show up immediately. So if I change the name on there, so if I take let's say I take my driver's license, Dave McKay, and let's say there's a young person who wants to buy alcohol with it, and they go, great, can you make it say Terry Michelson? And so I go in and change the name on it. So I could do that on the plastic one, And if I'm really good at it, no one's going to notice. But if I try to do that with a verifiable credential, it's going to fail the verification because it can tell that a change has been made. And so that's a really important aspect of it. And it's something that can be shared in a presentation, because sure, you can create a verifiable credential and give it to someone, but they must be able to take that verifiable credential and turn it into a way to present to someone to prove that claim that that organization has made about them. And so a really important part here is that proof needs to be machine readable. And so that allows a whole bunch of extra steps. So you know how some, let's say if you take credit cards, well, they may have they'll have a mag strip, or they'll have the little chip in there. They may have a hologram. There's a whole bunch of things that they'll do to try to make it so that someone can't forge it. But by having a machine readable proof and with some cryptography in there, it becomes a very powerful thing to do. So the verifiable credential, it's machine readable. It also has human readable parts to it, which is really useful, because then you can present those to humans. That's us, we're the humans. So, and we can actually read that to see, okay, what's in this claim. And it's a digital representation, and this allows it to be used online. And that's really important. Okay, so what are the parts of a verifiable credential? So verifiable credentials tend to be broken into 3 sections. Okay, so we have the metadata. And the metadata has things like, what type of credential is this? When was this issued? Who's the issuer? And these are the sort of things you may find on a driver's license. It may say Ontario driver's license, you know, the date it was issued from the province of Ontario. The claim is an assertion. So in the driver's license, it will say that, you know, Dave McKay has a Class G license. And then it may have some other information in there, like, you know, here's his date of birth, full name, address, other things like that. And the important part, and this is what makes it verifiable, is there's going to be a signature piece. And the signature has a couple pieces of information. There's a cryptographic algorithm. So it says what type of cryptography is used. And then there's a signature that's created using that cryptography. Okay, so what this means is that we take all of this information that's here, and we make a signature from this. And so that's really important, because that's what gives us the verifiability. So we can tell that it's from a certain organization. We can tell it's about a certain person, place, or thing. And then we can also see if it's been tampered with, because if somebody changes the claims or they change the metadata, that's going to break the signature. Okay, so what does a verifiable credential look like? So they tend to use what's called JSON data. And this is a representation of data that's it's mostly machine readable, but you can do a little bit of human reading as well. And so if we look at these different parts, we have the metadata. So up here, this says, hey, this is a W3C credential version 1 credential. And that this is, it's actually a university degree type credential. It was issued by this issuer, and here's the date it was issued on. And if we get into the claim part, it's basically, oh, it's a bachelor's degree in computer science issued to Alice Wonderland. And the signature part says, hey, great, we're going to use this signature algorithm, and here's the actual signature that's represented in here. And so this is kind of the representation that you see. Now, this isn't something that would be, if someone sends you a verifiable credential, you would hold it in a wallet, and you wouldn't really display it like this. There'd be a much nicer display to this. But behind the scenes, this is what it's going to look like. Okay, so how do these things work? So this is the important part. We have something that we call the trust triangle. And so this is a kind of an ideal situation. In reality, there's going to be thousands of issuers and thousands of verifiers, and maybe millions of holders. So what happens is the issuer, and for, let's say, for an example, that this is a university, and let's say I'm a university student. So let's take Toronto Metropolitan University. So let's say I take a course there. I take a certificate course in basic accounting. So as the issuer, they can say, hey, Dave McKay, this person, has graduated and received their certificate in accounting. So the certificate in accounting that Dave McKay took, that's the credential has the, remember, it's who, so, you know, who's taken this, who's issuing it, and what it's about. And so that can get generated as a credential. And so the issuer is going to send that to the holder. So now I have my digital wallet. And usually this is a mobile application. And so I can hold that in my mobile wallet. I have a copy of that. Now, the issuer has all that information. They have their systems where they keep track of who took classes and what grades they received. So they still have that information. But now I have a copy of that information that has their signature on it. So now when I go to prove to someone, so let's say I'm going to apply to a job at a company and I'm going to be doing bookkeeping for them. And they say, great, before you can bookkeep for us, we want to know that you're qualified to do that. And I can say, well, I took a course at Toronto Metropolitan University in accounting. Is that good enough? And they go, yes, send us proof. And so I can take the credential that was sent to me and I can create a proof presentation and I can send that off to them and they can verify that. They don't have to call up Toronto Metropolitan University. They don't have to have an integration with their computer system. Because of the cryptography that's in there, they can just trust that this was issued from them about me and it has not been tampered with. And so this is really the abstract way of looking at the power of this. And we'll go through those steps again. So the issuer, in this case, Toronto Metropolitan University, they'll gather data from their sources. That's their system of truth. So that might be their system that holds in it that Dave McKay took this the series of courses and was awarded a certificate in accounting. So they take that information and they build up the verifiable credential JSON. So remember this data here. They can put that data together. Okay, and then they offer the credential to me. So if we look at this, they say, great, we have this credential, Dave McKay, would you like your credential? And then I accept that and I get a copy of it. So now that's held in my digital wallet. Okay, and now I want to go apply for a job. And so when I apply for a job, this company can, oops, let's back to here. This organization here wants to verify my claim that I actually took this. Okay, and so I can generate a proof presentation. So I can generate this proof and I can send it to them and they can verify that proof. So there's quite a few steps involved in here, but through these steps, you're able to get your credential and use that credential. So it gives me agency over this. So why you need to do this sort of thing is the paper version doesn't work anymore. When I was in university, it was very rare for people to have printers. Like nobody had home printers. It was pretty much non-existent. So the university could print out on a computer paper my transcript, and I could take that with me and I could show that to people and they'd go, oh yeah, it must be from the university. Look, it's printed on a printer. But now that doesn't work because, you know, everybody has printers. And if you try to make it a PDF, well, everybody can open up PDFs. Or if you try to make it a PNG file or something like that, people have the ability to generate digital material themselves. So you need to have the cryptography part. You need to have the signature part here in this data so that you can prove that it actually came from the issuer, it's about you, and the claim data in it has not been tampered with. Okay, so how does this solve current problems? So remember we had that list of problems? So there was a forgery problem. So here's the thing is, the verifiable credentials themselves use cryptography. Okay, and so the cryptographic methods are ways where it's very, very, very difficult to be able to work backwards from that cryptography, what the original part was. So it makes it almost impossible. Like in the future, you know, as there's advances in computers and quantum computing and things like that, they'll be able to break cryptography of the past. But by then, you know, I'll get issued a new driver's license that will have quantum-proof cryptography in it. So because the verifiable credentials use cryptography or put things on the blockchain as ways of handling the cryptography, that forgeries are a thing of the past. Okay, it's going to be pretty much nearly impossible to make a forgery. And then it makes it really hard to have fraud because you can't tamper with those contents. So this is, you know, say goodbye to the teenagers who would have fake ID or pick someone else's ID to try to use to go buy alcohol. So you know, I feel bad that those people are not going to be able to take advantage of that. But that's unfortunate that that this kind of thing has much more important cases it needs to take care of. Easily lost. Here's the thing is, people really go out of their way not to lose their phone. So, you know, when I leave my house, I always check, you know, my pocket, do I have my phone in there? So it's pretty rare nowadays for people to lose their phone, because you lose your phone, you lose everything. And they're really expensive things too. And your phone holds so many different things on it that it makes it so people try not to lose this. Also, if you do lose it, you know, you've got a backup up in the cloud and you restore all of your data. Easily damaged. So the verifiable credentials are not plastic or paper, they're digital. So, you know, I guess you could damage it with a hammer or something if someone destroys your phone, but it's really hard to damage the cloud with a hammer. And one of the problems, remember I was talking about a moment in time. So a driver's license was, okay, well, great. Dave McKay came in, he took his test, he took the driving test, he passed, we issued him a driver's license. Now, if later on it's revoked, then with the digital version, the verifiable credential, it can actually track whether it's been revoked or not. So if it has been revoked, then that credential is not good anymore. Whereas if I have that plastic credential, I could use that to go out and rent another car. But if a revoked one, they'll say, no, we can't rent you a car. You drove too fast and your driver's license was taken away. These things are, they're made for computers. So this kind of data that we showed here, this is exactly the type of data that is used for computers all the time. This is a really easy way to work with this kind of data in a computer programming language. So it means that these are machine readable and it's easy for computers to work with. But there's also the data that could be displayed. This can be taken out, extracted, and displayed in a nice display for someone to see, a human to be able to see that. Okay, and these can be used online. So this opens up a whole bunch of possibilities. We have things that you have to do in person. So here in Canada, if you want to open up a bank account, you pretty much have to go in person. You have to show your various forms of ID, and they take a photocopy of your ID, and that's how you prove who you are. There's a lot of cases where if you rent a car, you have to show, you know, your driver's license. You probably have to show another form of photo ID. So there's a lot of things that you have to show up in person, because the IDs that you used to have in the current system, paper and plastic, you have to carry those with you to show it. Now you can do these things online. And so this is going to open up an awful lot of possibilities. So, you know, when you go to rent your car ahead of time, you can set everything up so that you just show up and get your car and away you go. If you are opening up a bank account, you can open up a bank account wherever you want, because you'll have all the information to satisfy those conditions. You can do the same thing if you're trying to do any financial transactions, get a mortgage or get a loan, or purchase stocks and bonds and things like that. So having this online opens up all sorts of interesting possibilities. of where people had to show up in person to identify themselves. Okay, and so what benefits do the verifiable credentials bring? So here's a big one: is it saves time and money on verifying credentials. So right now in hospitals, if they're going to hire a staff member, whether it's a nurse or a doctor or a specialist, so maybe someone who works with, I don't know, an X-ray technician, those kind of things, they need to verify their credentials before they allow them to work there. And so what they do is the person has to bring the credential into them, and then they have to pay a third-party company who goes off and researches it and finds out if the credential is valid because of all the fraud that goes on with these things. And so that takes time and it takes money. And so they found the person, but they can't have them work until that process has happened. And if that process is backlogged, it could take a couple of weeks before everything is verified. So the amount of time and money you can save with quick verification is really important. This is the point I was making earlier that allows in-person transactions to be done online. So let's say you're purchasing a home. So quite often you have to show up in person and have all the parties there together to sign the documents. But if you could sign these things online because you can prove who you are, then that's a really valuable thing that makes much more convenient to do transactions. And there's a lot of processes that are very tricky and need a lot of steps, and it's easier to get through that if you have your verifiable credentials that you can bring with you. So let's say you are, there's an example in the city of Vancouver. If I'm a tenant and I wish to sublet my apartment out through, let's say, Airbnb, and this is something they allow, but what that means is that the tenant has to actually get permission from the landlord and take that to the city before they can get a permit where they can do that. And then the landlord has to have a permit, they have to have a business license so that they can rent to someone. And to do that, they have to make sure that they have a credential that represents that they are the owner of the property. So there's a land title they have to get. So there's all these different credentials that all these different people have to get. And if they have to go in person to get all of these things, then at some point it's too much effort. It's too much time and too much money to bother doing it. But if these things can be gathered online, if they can be then used online, all of a sudden it's way easier to get through processes that would normally be roadblocks for getting things done. So it's very beneficial to have the verifiable credentials. Okay, and where are these things being used? What's the current marketplace look like for this? So there's a lot of people who are using verifiable credentials for digital identity. So there are quite a few companies who will put systems like this together so that governments can issue things like foundational ID, like birth certificates, marriage certificates, divorce, death certificates. Governments do other things like driver's licenses, health cards, passports, things like outdoorsman cards, hunting licenses, and then you have other levels of governments that will do other sort of documents to identify who you are, and that may be licensure and things like that. Also, this is really popular in the education space. So learning and education records are really big. And so there's several companies that have systems for LERs, as they're referred to. And so this is for tracking skills that people have gained. So micro-credentials in schools, diplomas, school transcripts, information like that. And this can stay with you your entire life because you have these verifiable credentials on your device, your phone. The same thing with your digital identity. You can have your birth certificate, you can have all of your other identity documents with you. It's also really useful in the financial know your client. So if you're trying to work with a financial company, they need to have proof that they know who you are and what your investment strategies are. So let's say you're trying to save money to buy a house, or you're saving money to retire on. That's very different than you're like, okay, I need to make enough money so I can get a second yacht. So the approaches people have to investing, any sort of financial advisor needs to know that kind of information, so that if they give you a really risky thing, they say, yeah, and put all your money on this company that makes Labubu dolls or something like that. And if you put all your money in there and then the whole thing goes south and you lose it all, then you can go back and sue them because they gave you really bad advice that they should not have given to someone who's trying to save for their retirement. That's the kind of get rich quick kind of stuff that the person who wants to buy a second yacht may want to do. So by having these credentials, when you go through the KYC process, they can say, yes, this is the person, and this is the information that we have on them. Things like driver's licenses, this is really popular. There's actually a whole type of credential around driver's licenses. But this gets into a lot of those other documents that I was talking about. So, building permits and manufacturer's warranties, insurance policy certificates. So a lot of different things fit that role. Travel documents are really popular as verifiable credentials. So there's a lot of effort to put passports on there, boarding passes. People will also use this for like there's special lounges in airports that, if you're a member of a certain thing or using a certain airline, you get to go use the lounge. For a while there in the pandemic, there was a lot of effort to try to get vaccine passports. So there were countries that wouldn't let you enter the country unless you could show proof of a vaccination. And so that's very popular in this. So the places where this is happening, Europe is really big on verifiable credentials. They have laws that are coming into play where they are mandating that companies in 2026 in Europe be able to use digital identity. In the United States, they're very big on the learning and education records. Asia is putting a lot of work towards this. Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand are very much into having the digital identity documents. India is very forward on this, and there's a lot of Indian companies that are helping out a lot of places in Asia as well. We're waiting for Google and Apple to get into this marketplace. Apple has recently announced kind of putting their toes in. And where this is really important is in Google and Apple basically control the smartphones. And the smartphones is where your wallet for holding your verifiable credentials are in. And it would be really nice if they provided sort of software development kits and the basic services of the credential issuing and verifying from their actual devices, so that the holders would be able to use their basic credentials amongst different applications. So right now, if you have a verifiable credential wallet, that's where you hold all your credentials, and none of the other apps on your phone can see those things. If it was provided by Google or Apple, they could make it so that the credentials you have, other applications could see that. And that would be really useful to handle. The other thing is Microsoft got into this, but they got into this about 2 years ago, and they got in a little too early, and the technology wasn't ready, and people didn't know what it was. And so Microsoft has kind of lost a little bit of interest in this space. They may come back to it, but they probably won't for a few years, just because they got in too early. So I think what's going to happen is the innovation is going to be happening from these types of companies, and it'll be happening in sort of these kind of spaces and in these places. And then once it gets going, then I think Google and Apple will come in and join the game to get involved with this. Okay, and so that is the end of the presentation, and now I'll take questions. Gordon, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, sorry. A question did just pop into my head while we were just going over right here. When you had this when you have this diagram up right in here, uh, like I get the idea. Yeah, I definitely understand what the idea behind it, and that the whole and that everything works in equilibrium with the holder and getting from the issuer, and then the verifier being able to. I did like being able to like use the issuer to build trust and be able to verify the proof of the credential. I'm just curious. Yeah, and this is kind of a hypothetical question. Is it possible, if in any way, for the issuer to like, if for this to break? I mean, is it ever possible? Is there any way that the issuer could ever become compromised and break this trinity?
Yeah. So if the issuer has their private key stolen, then that breaks the credential and proof part. And so the way to handle that is the issuer needs to rotate their key. That means they need to create a new public key and private key. And then on the blockchain, they have to change the key they have. That it's called key rotation. And so when they put their new public key up there, it also means they have to issue all new credentials to everybody. So what they can do is they can send a message through the connection they have and say, hey, all of the credentials that we issued before are no good. If these credentials are able to be revoked, they'll probably just revoke those credentials. And then they'll say you need to go and retrieve new credentials. So that would be a way that could happen. For the verifier, let's say that someone has done a Sybil attack, a 50% plus one attack against the blockchain, and they use that to write a new public key in for the issuer. Then that's a way that someone could try to fraudulently create their own credentials and send the proofs through. It's a lot of work to do that. Some people will use a DID method. So the way the verifier can check and find the public key of the issuer is they use the DID that's in here. And so if there's a DID method called DID web. And so DID web means you don't go to a blockchain, you just go to the website of the issuer and you can get the public key from there. There are problems with that in that, sure, the issuer can control their DNS information, but you can't control what the verifier sees for their DNS. So if someone has come in and changed the DNS control of the verifier, they could change where instead of when they go look to their website, it could go somewhere else and give them bad information. And that's really hard to spot if you're not a sophisticated company and you don't realize that your DNS server has been compromised. And so it's really a problem that people just don't see at all. And so that's why we use the blockchain piece. Now, here's the other thing is you could compromise someone's DNS and point to a different blockchain node that does something else. And that's an issue. Now, a lot of times with the, this is why with the blockchain stuff, and we do this with our edu ledger that we have with the DigiCred stuff, is that you don't use the DNS entry for it. You actually use an IP address. And that way, the DNS is not going to be an issue with that.
Well, for me, the strongest one is allows in-person only transactions to be done online. For example, opening bank account. Like same thing that people were going to the banks to pay their bills. Now we look back and see how comfortable it is paying online.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I forgot about that. I used to have to line up at the bank.
Yeah.
And I would have my phone bill and my, whatever else. And you'd have to, I guess, well, we didn't have internet back then. I had a phone bill and maybe my cable bill. And so you'd show up in person at the bank and you do these and they would stamp it for you. So you'd have proof. And then they would send that information off, and it would take several days for your phone company to get the payment. Wow, I forgot about that stuff.
I think until 2005 or early 2000, it was like that.
Yeah, everything was in person for everything. Like we didn't even have ATMs, and banks would be closed on the weekend. So Friday afternoon, you'd have to get to the bank, otherwise you wouldn't have money for the weekend. And this would always happen every once in a while. Like, I got to the bank and I didn't have enough time. It was my lunch hour, and and then you have to ask your friends to borrow some money over the weekend, and it was ridiculous. Gordon?
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree with Umad, but I also want to add to it. I really hope one day this will definitely work with government related transactions or processes, because probably everyone knows the horror of having to wait in line for God knows how long, and then realize to your own horror that you forgot. Oh wait, this is not the right ID, and
Well,
have to come in the next day.
Yeah, I've had that where you go to get your passport, but to get your passport you have to have a birth certificate. So to get the birth certificate, you've got to get the forms for that and get all the information together, and then you also have to have a photo, and then you have to have someone vouch for that, and there's all these things you have to do. And if you get any of the paperwork wrong, you have to start back at the beginning of the line again. And these things all happen in different places. The photo happens at a photographer's studio. The birth certificate comes from a different part of the government. It's from the provincial government. The passport's from the federal government. And there's other things like that too. I've applied for. I used to run outdoor festivals, and so for the outdoor festival, you have to have a bunch of things where you have to have a insurance policy that covers a certain amount of liability. You have to have an emergency plan that you've registered with the police and the fire department. You have to have, so you have to have all of these different things that you have to go to different places to do. And then finally, you bring all this to get your permit to have an event on public property. And if anything is wrong or missing, then you have to go back. Like, oh yeah, the fire department didn't get this right. You have to go back to them. So then you have to, set up an appointment with the fire department again and go down in person. They go, oh yeah, sorry, we got that wrong. And then you get a new version of that and you have to start all over again. It's very frustrating, and this kind of thing can change a lot of that. Not that I'll ever run outdoor events again. Too old for that.